In the world of the wolf, strength is everything, and weakness is a death sentence. But what happens when the weakest member of the pack, a silent, trembling maid nobody looks at twice, holds a secret terrifying enough to bring the Alpha King himself to his knees? For years, Clara was invisible, scrubbing floors and taking abuse, hiding a power that could destroy the hierarchy forever. But one fateful night, King Roman decided to follow her into the Forbidden Woods. He expected to find a traitor. Instead, he found a truth that would shatter his world. You think you know werewolf stories? You have no idea what's coming. The grand hallway of the Silver Creek pack house smelled of lemon polish and fear. Clara dipped her rag into the bucket of grey water, her hands red and raw from the harsh chemicals. She was 22 years old, yet she looked much younger, her frame slight and hidden beneath a shapeless, oversized grey uniform that seemed designed to erase her existence. Clara was an Omega, but in the Silver Creek pack, she was treated as something less than that. She was a null, a wolf who had never shifted, never smelled of anything other than soap and dust. To the high-ranking members of the pack, she was furniture that breathed. "Mr. Spot, runt!" A sharp voice echoed off the marble walls. Clara didn't flinch. She was used to it. She kept her head down, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, shielding her expression. Beatrice, the beta female's daughter, and the pack's undisputed queen bee, stood over her. Beatrice was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful, sharp, cold, and dangerous. She kicked the bucket of dirty water. Ideally, it would have just tipped over. But Beatrice had put her alpha blood strength into it. The bucket skidded hard, slamming into Clara's shin before spilling sludge all over the pristine floor she had just spent an hour scrubbing. "Oops," Beatrice sneered, her friends giggling behind her. "Better clean that up before the king arrives. You know how King Roman feels about filth." King Roman. The name alone made the air in the room grow heavy. He was the alpha of alphas, the ruler of all packs on the western coast. Rumors said he was a monster in battle, a man who had executed his own uncle for treason without blinking. He was visiting Silver Creek to assess their loyalty, and the entire pack was on edge. Clara said nothing. She simply grabbed the bucket, righted it, and began to mop up the mess. "Are you deaf?" Beatrice stepped closer, grabbing a handful of Clara's hair and yanking her head back. "I said, you better clean it up." Clara's eyes met Beatrice's. For a split second, there was no fear in Clara's gaze. There was only a cold, hollow abyss. A darkness so profound that Beatrice actually faltered, her grip loosening. It was the look of someone who had seen hell and found it boring. "I am cleaning it, Beatrice," Clara whispered. Her voice was raspy from disuse. Beatrice, unsettled but refusing to show it, shoved Clara back down. "Freak! Don't let the king see you. You'll embarrass the whole pack." As Beatrice and her clique strutted away, the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall groaned open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alpha King Roman had arrived. He didn't walk, he stalked. He was over 6 feet of coiled muscle, wearing a black tailored suit that cost more than the pack house itself. His presence was suffocating. Every wolf in the vicinity bared their necks in submission, the instinctual urge to bow overwhelming them. Behind him walked his beta, Silas, a man with a scarred face and a tablet in hand. "Alpha distinct," Silas muttered. "The Silver Creek Alpha is waiting in his office." Roman didn't answer. He stopped in the middle of the hallway. His nostrils flared. He had the scent of a predator. Pine, rain, and old blood. But beneath the overwhelming smell of lemon polish and the stale fear of the pack wolves, he caught something else. It was faint, like ozone before a lightning strike, like the smell of the air after a heavy snow. He turned his head slowly, his predatory golden eyes locking onto the wet spot on the floor, and the small, trembling girl on her hands and knees scrubbing it. Clara felt his gaze like a physical weight. every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to vanish, but she froze. "Do not look up," she chanted internally. "Be invisible. Be the dust." Roman took a step toward her. The sound of his dress shoe clicking on the marble was the loudest thing in the world. "Who is this?" Roman asked. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in Clara's chest. Alpha Sterling, the leader of Silver Creek, came rushing out of his office, sweating profusely. "Your Majesty, I apologize. That is just the help. She's a null, useless thing. I told her to be out of sight." Sterling kicked at Clara's foot. "Get out of here, girl!" Clara scrambled to her feet, clutching her bucket. She kept her head bowed so low her chin touched her chest. "Wait," Roman commanded. Clara froze. Roman stepped closer, ignoring Alpha Sterling. He leaned in, inhaling deeply near Clara's neck. Clara held her breath, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was terrified, but not because of his rank. She was terrified he would smell the lie. "She has no scent," Roman murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Not even a human scent." "Like I said, a null," Sterling laughed nervously. "A genetic mistake. We keep her around out of pity." Roman narrowed his eyes. He stared at the back of Clara's neck, where a few strands of hair had escaped her bun. There was a faint, white scar there, barely visible. "Look at me," Roman ordered. Clara hesitated. To look an Alpha King in the eye was a challenge. It was a death wish. "Look at me." Slowly Clara lifted her head. Her eyes were a startling, pale grey, the colour of a winter sky. When they met Roman's gold ones, the world seemed to tilt. Roman felt a jolt of electricity shoot down his spine, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the mate bond. He knew what that felt like, and he had buried his mate years ago. This was something else. Recognition? Warning? Clara's face was plain, devoid of makeup, her skin pale and tired, but those eyes held a storm. "What is your name?" he asked. "Clara, Your Majesty," she whispered. Roman studied her for a second longer than was comfortable. He was looking for a flinch, a sign of the weak wolf she was supposed to be. But she stood still as a statue. "Go," he said abruptly, turning his back on her. Clara didn't wait to be told twice. She grabbed her bucket and vanished into the servants' corridors. As she rounded the corner, she leaned against the rough brick wall, exhaling a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She looked at them. Steady. Strong. She looked back toward the hallway where the most powerful wolf in the world stood. "He suspects," she thought. "I have to be more careful." Dinner that night was a lavish affair. The Silver Creek pack had pulled out all the stops to impress the king. Roast venison, expensive wines, and speeches about loyalty and prosperity filled the banquet hall. Roman sat at the head of the table, nursing a glass of bourbon. He was bored. He had visited 50 packs in the last year, and they were all the same. Greedy alphas, preening betas, and daughters paraded in front of him in hopes of becoming the next Lunar Queen. His eyes scanned the room, ignoring the flirtatious glances from Beatrice, who was wearing a dress that left very little to the imagination. He wasn't looking for a queen. He was looking for the girl with the grey eyes. She wasn't serving food, she wasn't pouring wine. She was gone. "Where is the girl?" Roman asked, cutting off Alpha Sterling mid-sentence. Sterling blinked, a piece of venison hanging from his fork. "Who? Beatrice?" "The maid," Roman said flatly. "Clara." The table went silent. Beatrice let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "The null? She sleeps in the shed out back, Your Majesty. She's not allowed in the main house during feasts. She ruins the appetite." Roman set his glass down. "The shed." "Yes," Sterling said quickly. "She's fed, don't worry. We give her the leftovers." Roman felt a surge of irrational anger. He didn't care about servants. He was a king who dealt in war and politics. But something about the way Clara had stood up to Beatrice's abuse and the utter emptiness in her scent gnawed at him. His wolf, a massive black beast named Titan, was pacing in his mind. "Follow," Titan growled. "Something is wrong." Roman stood up. "I need air. The meeting resumes in the morning." Before anyone could protest, he walked out the French doors and onto the patio. He waited until the sounds of the party faded. Then he leapt over the railing, shifting his senses to the night. He moved silently through the gardens toward the dilapidated wooden structure near the edge of the forest that served as the shed. It was a pathetic excuse for a home, drafty and rotting. He approached the window, expecting to see the girl sleeping on a cot. The shed was empty. The cot was neatly made. A single battered book lay on the pillow. But Clara was gone. Roman touched the door handle. It was locked from the outside. Someone had locked her in, but she wasn't there. He looked at the window. It was painted shut. How did she get out? He crouched down, examining the dirt around the shed. There, faintly, were footprints. Bare feet. They led away from the pack house, directly toward the dark woods, the section of the forest that bordered the rogue lands. It was a suicide zone. Bears, rogue wolves, and treacherous ravines filled those woods. No Omega, let alone a Null, would dare enter. Roman loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. He began to run. He moved with supernatural speed, a shadow passing through the trees. He didn't shift into his wolf form. He didn't want to alert anyone. He tracked the faint disturbance in the leaves. She was fast, much faster than a human. He traveled 3 miles into the deep woods, the canopy so thick it blocked out the moon. The terrain grew rocky and steep. He finally heard a sound. It wasn't the sound of a girl crying or stumbling. It was the sound of impact. Thwack, thwack, whoosh. Roman slowed down, masking his scent completely, a skill only Master Alphas possessed. He crept toward a small clearing, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight breaking through the trees. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. Clara was there. But she wasn't the hunchbacked, trembling maid from the hallway. She was shirtless, wearing only a pair of ragged training pants. Her body was not frail. It was a map of lean, corded muscle. Scars, vicious, jagged scars that looked like claw marks, crisscrossed her back and ribs. She was holding a long wooden staff, facing 3 wooden dummies she had clearly constructed herself, and lashed to the trees. She moved like water. She spun the staff, striking the first dummy with enough force to splinter the wood, then vaulted over it, kicking the second dummy in the head with a spinning heel kick that was technically perfect. She landed silently, breathing rhythmically. But it wasn't just the fighting. It was the energy around her. As she moved, the air distorted. The leaves on the ground swirled around her feet, not from wind, but from pressure. "Too slow," she muttered to herself. Her voice wasn't raspy now. It was clear and cold. She dropped the staff and closed her eyes. She spread her arms wide. Roman watched, mesmerizing, as the shadows in the clearing seemed to detach themselves from the trees. They crawled toward her, wrapping around her arms like living ink. "She's a witch," Roman thought, his hand reaching for the silver dagger in his belt. A witch hiding in a wolf pack. But then Clara threw her head back and let out a sound that wasn't a spell. It was a growl, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound like a wolf. It sounded prehistoric. Her bones cracked. Roman braced himself for the shift. He expected a wolf. Maybe a runt, maybe something deformed. Clara didn't turn into a wolf. Her skin rippled, turning obsidian black. Scales? No, fur. But thick, armored fur. Her size doubled, her snout elongated, but it was broader than a wolf's, the teeth serrated like a shark's. A long, tufted tail whipped behind her. She wasn't a werewolf. She was a lichen, an ancient, pure-blooded killing machine that was supposed to have gone extinct 200 years ago. The massive beast, Clara, let out a roar that shook the trees, a sound of pure, unadulterated power. She leapt 15 feet into the air, slashing through a thick oak branch with a single swipe of her claws. Roman stepped back, a twig snapping under his heel. The beast froze mid-landing. It whipped its massive head around. Burning violet eyes, not grey, not gold, but the violet of royalty and death, locked onto Roman's position in the bushes. She knew he was there. The beast crouched, ready to spring. Roman realized with a sinking feeling that he was in human form, unarmed, facing a creature that could tear an alpha apart in seconds. And she wasn't just any lichen. The violet eyes signified something even the history books barely mentioned. She was a royal. "Clara," Roman said, stepping out of the shadows, raising his hands. "I know it's you." The beast snarled, saliva dripping from jaws that could crush a skull. It took a step toward him, the ground trembling. Then, from the darkness behind Clara, a man's voice spoke. Smooth, amused, and terrifyingly familiar. "Stand down, little one. We don't eat kings yet." Roman's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. He had heard it 10 years ago, right before he watched the man die. A figure stepped into the moonlight, wearing a tattered cloak. He lowered his hood. It was a man with an eye patch and greying hair. "Hello, Roman," the man said. "It's been a while." It was General Marcus, the greatest traitor in werewolf history, the man Roman had personally killed a decade ago, and he was standing next to the maid, his hand resting gently on the monstrous liken's shoulder. "You," Roman choked out. The lichen shifted back. Bones snapped and rearranged until Clara stood there, naked and panting, her human eyes blazing with defiance. She snatched a blanket from the ground and wrapped it around herself. "You shouldn't have followed me, Alpha," Clara said, her voice shaking with rage, not fear. "Now I can't let you leave." The air in the clearing was thick enough to choke on. Roman, usually the apex predator in any room, felt a terrifying sensation clawing at his gut. Vulnerability. He was standing between a dead man walking and a myth come to life. "You're supposed to be rotting in the tomb of traitors," Roman growled at Marcus, his voice tight. He dared not take his eyes off Clara, who stood wrapped in the blanket, shivering not from cold, but from the adrenaline of her shift. Her violet human eyes were still glowing faintly in the dark. Marcus chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. He moved with a casual grace that belied his age, stepping between Clara and the king. "Ah, the tomb. Dreadfully damp. I decided I preferred the open air. Besides, I had a babysitting job to attend to." He gestured to Clara with a mock bow. Roman's patience snapped. The confusion and fear boiled over into pure alpha aggression. He didn't care if it was a trap. He was the king. He didn't submit. With a roar that matched the lichen's earlier cry, Roman shifted. It was a violent, instantaneous transformation. His clothes shredded as Titan, a massive wolf with fur as black as a starless night, and eyes of molten gold burst forth. He was enormous, bigger than any normal alpha, a creature built for war. Titan didn't hesitate. He lunged straight for Marcus's throat. Marcus didn't shift. He didn't even flinch. As the massive black wolf flew through the air, jaws gaping, Marcus simply stepped to the side with impossible speed for a human. He didn't use strength. He used leverage. As Titan passed him, Marcus slammed an open palm into the wolf's flank, right behind the ribcage. It was a precise, calculated strike to a nerve cluster, known only to ancient masters of combat. Titan yelped, a sound Roman hated making, and crashed into the dirt, his back legs momentarily paralyzed. He snarled, trying to scramble back up, his pride stinging more than his side. "Sloppy, Roman," Marcus tutted, dusting off his hands. "Your father taught you better than that. You rely too much on the brute strength of the alpha blood. You've forgotten technique." Roman roared in frustration, forcing his paralyzing legs to work, turning to snap at Marcus again. "Enough!" The voice wasn't loud, but it carried a resonance that vibrated in Roman's very bones. It was Clara. She dropped the blanket. She stood naked in the moonlight, unashamed, her body a testament to brutal training and ancient power. She walked toward the massive black wolf. Titan growled low in his throat, a warning. "Back off." Clara didn't stop. She walked right up to the snarling king. She placed a small, calloused hand directly onto Titan's muzzle, right between his eyes. Roman tried to bite her hand off. He couldn't. An overwhelming, paralyzing wave of command washed over him. It wasn't the command of an alpha, which he could resist. This was deeper. It felt primordial. It felt like the earth itself telling him to sit down. His ears flattened against his head, against his will. His tail tucked. The great King Titan whined, his massive body trembling as he was forced into a submissive crouch by a girl half his size. "He is not the enemy right now, Marcus," Clara said coldly, her eyes never leaving the wolf's gold ones. "He's just an ignorant boy who stumbled into something bigger than his crown." Marcus sighed. "He's a loose end, Clara. If he goes back to the pack house, he brings an army down on us by dawn." "I know," Clara whispered. She stroked the fur between Titan's eyes, a gesture that was both soothing and deeply insulting to the king buried inside the wolf. "Which is why he's coming with us." Roman tried to fight the submission, to shift back to human form and demand answers, but he was trapped in his own fur, held down by the sheer weight of her royal aura. Marcus pulled a small leather pouch from his belt. He extracted a dart tipped with a viscous green liquid. "Wolfsbane?" Clara asked, eyeing the dart. "Mixed with concentrated wraith root," Marcus replied. "It won't kill an alpha of his standing, but it will knock Titan out cold and keep him human for at least 24 hours. Apologies, Your Majesty. This is going to sting." Roman saw the dart coming. He tried to lunge, to run, but Clara's hand on his muzzle held him fast like an iron bar. Marcus jammed the dart into the wolf's neck. Fire ripped through Roman's veins. The world tilted sideways. The golden eyes of the wolf rolled back, and the massive black beast collapsed into the dirt, shifting painfully back into the unconscious, naked form of King Roman. Clara looked down at the most powerful man on the continent, sprawled helpless at her feet. "He's heavier than he looks," Clara murmured. "Grab his legs," General Marcus grunted, hefting Roman's upper body. "We have to get him underground before the Silver Creek patrols smell the shift." Waking up was a slow, agonizing process. Roman felt like his brain had been run through a meat grinder. His mouth tasted like copper and ash. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His head spun violently. He realized he was lying on a stiff cot, covered in scratchy wool blankets. He was dressed in simple linen trousers and a tunic, not his expensive suit. He opened his eyes, waiting for vision to stabilize. He wasn't in the pack house. He wasn't outdoors. He was in a bunker. The walls were made of thick, seamless concrete, stained with decades of dampness. The lighting came from sputtering electric lanterns strung along the ceiling. The air was cool and smelled of earth, oil and, faintly, Clara's scent. Roman sat up, his instincts screaming for his wolf. He tried to reach for Titan. Shift. Nothing happened. It felt like hitting a brick wall inside his own mind. The wraith root. He was trapped in his human skin. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. An alpha without his wolf was just a man. A very vulnerable man. On the other side of the small, austere room, sitting on a metal folding chair, sat General Marcus. He was whittling a piece of wood with a wicked-looking hunting knife. "Ah, Sleeping Beauty awakens," Marcus said without looking up. "Drink the water next to you. It'll help with the headache." Roman eyed the metal cup on the small table next to the cot. He didn't touch it. "Where am I, Marcus? And why aren't you dead?" Marcus blew wood shavings off his carving. It looked like a small wolf figurine. "You're in an old Cold War fallout shelter, about 5 miles north of the Silver Creek territory line. As for why I'm not dead, well, let's just say your executioner owed me a favor. The man you thought you buried was a rogue I killed 2 days prior, glamoured to look like me." Roman's jaw tightened. The betrayal stung. "You were convicted of treason. You conspired with the Eastern Rogue Alliance to assassinate my father, Alpha King Lucius." Marcus finally looked up. His single good eye was hard as flint. Your father was a fool who was leading our species into a genocide against humans. He wanted to expose us, to start a war. I didn't conspire to kill him, Roman. I tried to stop him from destroying us all. I was framed by the real conspirators, the ones who are still whispering in your ear today. Roman scoffed. Lies. You're a traitor and a coward. If I were a coward, I would have let that girl die 22 years ago, Marcus said quietly, pointing the knife toward the heavy steel door of the room. Roman fell silent. The girl. Clara. The lichen. Talk, Roman commanded. Who is she? You saw her eyes, boy. You know what she is. Marcus leaned forward. History tells us the lichen royals died out in the Great Purge 2 centuries ago. Werewolves hunted them down because we feared their power. We were wrong. One line survived. Hidden in plain sight. She's a true royal, Roman breathed, the reality sinking in. The legend said the true royals didn't just command wolves, they commanded the elements of nature itself. They were closer to gods than shifters. Her mother died giving birth to her in a blizzard on the edge of the rogue lands, Marcus recounted, his voice distant. I found them. I knew what she was the moment I saw those violet eyes. If the current Wolf Council knew she existed, they wouldn't just kill her. They would dissect her. They would try to steal her power. So you hid her, Roman realized. Where? How? Everywhere. Nowhere. We moved constantly. I trained her to control the beast, to lock away the power so she appeared as nothing more than a useless null. The perfect camouflage. Who looks twice at the Omega scrubbing the floors? Marcus gave a bitter smile. We chose Silver Creek because Alpha Sterling is an idiot. He's too busy counting money and chasing tail to notice a goddess living in his garden shed. Roman felt a sickening mix of awe and horror. He had looked right through her. Everyone had. And now you know, Marcus said, standing up, which is a catastrophic problem for all of us. The heavy steel door groaned open. Clara walked in. She wore simple dark clothing, similar to what she'd worn in the woods, but her presence filled the cramped bunker. She didn't look like a maid anymore. Her spine was steel, her chin held high. When she looked at Roman, he felt stripped bare. She held a tray with a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread. She set it down on the table with a clatter. Eat, she ordered. It wasn't a polite request. Roman glared at her. I don't take orders from Omegas. Clara didn't blink. Faster than Roman could track, she grabbed the front of his tunic and slammed him back against the concrete wall, her forearm pressed against his throat, cutting off his air. She leaned in close. Her grey eyes swirled, momentarily flashing that terrifying violet. Let's get something straight, Your Majesty, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. In your world, up there in the sunlight with your marble floors and your titles, you are king. But down here, in the dark, you are prey. I am the apex predator. You exist right now because I allow it. Do not test my patience. She released him abruptly. Roman gasped for air, rubbing his throat. He was furious at being manhandled, but his wolf brain was screaming in terrified submission. She was magnificent. Terrifying, but magnificent. Clara stepped back, crossing her arms. Marcus thinks we can use you. He thinks if we show you the truth about the council, you'll help us. And what do you think? Roman croaked, locking eyes with her. Clara studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment. I think kings are used to crushing whatever they don't understand. I think it would be safer to snap your neck and bury you out here in the woods. She turned to Marcus. The Silver Creek pack is mobilizing. Beatrice is screaming that the Null kidnapped the king. They're organizing search parties with bloodhounds. We don't have much time before they stumble on the ventilation shafts. Roman looked from the hardened general to the lethal lichen queen who had been scrubbing his floors just hours ago. He realized his life hung in the balance of their debate. If they find us, Marcus said grimly, honing his knife again. It's war. And Clara isn't ready for war yet. Clara looked back at Roman, a flicker of something, indecision, regret, in her eyes. Then we have to make sure they don't find us, Clara said. Or we have to make sure the king convinces them there's nothing to find. The bunker was silent, save for the hum of the air filtration system. Hours had passed. Roman's strength was returning, though the connection to his wolf, Titan, remained a dull, aching void. He sat on the edge of the cot, watching Clara. She wasn't looking at him. She was stripping down a Glock 19 at the small metal table, her movements precise and practiced. It was a jarring image. The girl who had cleaned his muddy footprints just yesterday was now cleaning a lethal weapon with the same efficiency. You're staring, Clara said, not looking up. It's hard not to, Roman replied, his voice raspy. Yesterday you were a mouse. Today you're a soldier. I'm trying to decide which one is the lie. Clara slid the barrel back into place with a sharp metallic click. She finally looked at him. In the harsh electric light, he saw the exhaustion under her eyes. Being a goddess in hiding was evidently tiring. The mouse was the lie, Roman, she said. But the soldier isn't the truth either. It's just necessary. Why didn't you kill me in the woods? Roman asked softly. You could have. No one would have known. Clara stood up and walked over to him. She stopped just inches away. The scent of her, rainwater, ozone, and something wild like crushed pine needles, filled his head. Without his wolf to filter his emotions, Roman felt the raw, human reaction to her proximity. She was beautiful in a terrifying, austere way. I didn't kill you because you're not like your father, Clara said, her gaze searching his face. Marcus told me stories. You ended the blood tithe. You built schools for the Omegas in the capital. You aren't a monster, Roman. You're just blind. Blind to what? To the rot in your own court. Before Roman could argue, a red light on the wall began to pulse silently. Marcus, who had been dozing in a chair by the monitors, snapped awake instantly. He leaned over the surveillance screens that showed the forest floor above them. We have company, Marcus growled, and it's not the Silver Creek search party. Roman moved to the screens, fighting a wave of dizziness. On the grainy black and white monitor, 3 black SUVs were tearing through the dense forest, crushing saplings under their reinforced tires. They didn't have pack markings. They had a symbol painted on the doors, a silver eye crossed by a dagger. Roman's blood ran cold. The Inquisition, he whispered. The High Council's private cleaners. They aren't here for a social call, Marcus said, grabbing a duffel bag and tossing it to Clara. They found us, which means someone tipped them off. No one knows I'm here, Roman insisted. My beta, Silas, thinks I was kidnapped. Silas. Marcus let out a dark laugh. Roman, look at the screen. Roman leaned closer. The SUVs screeched to a halt near the hidden entrance of the bunker. Men in tactical gear poured out. But it was the man stepping out of the lead vehicle that made Roman's heart stop. It was Silas, his beta, his best friend since childhood. Silas wasn't looking for a kidnapped king. He was directing the soldiers toward the ventilation shafts, pointing out the exact location of the hidden bunker. He was smiling. He sold you out, Clara said quietly, standing beside Roman. She didn't sound triumphant. She sounded sad. He didn't just sell me out. He sold you out to get to me. Roman felt like he had been punched in the gut. Silas, the man he trusted with his life, the man who guarded his door while he slept. Why? Roman breathed. Because the council fears the Lycan return more than they love their king, Marcus said, cocking a shotgun. And Silas has always been ambitious. If he hands over the last Lycan, the council will make him king over your dead body. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the bunker. Dust rained down from the ceiling. They're blowing the blast doors, Clara shouted over the ringing in their ears. We have to move. Now! Roman looked at the screen one last time, watching his best friend order men to slaughter everyone inside. The betrayal burned away the last of the wolfsbane fog in his mind. He didn't have Titan back yet, but he had something else. Rage. Cold, human rage. "Give me a gun," Roman said, turning to Clara. Clara hesitated for a split second, then pulled a pistol from her waistband and slapped it into his palm. "Don't shoot me," she warned. "I'm saving my bullets for Silas," Roman growled. "The escape tunnel leads to the gorge," Marcus shouted, kicking open a rusted hatch in the floor. "It's a 3-mile run underground. Move!" Clara dropped into the dark hole first, followed by Roman, with Marcus bringing up the rear. They scrambled down a metal ladder into a damp, narrow sewage pipe that smelled of rust and decay. Above them, the sound of boots on concrete echoed. The Inquisition was inside. "They'll have thermal scopes," Clara whispered, her voice echoing in the tunnel. "We have to keep moving. If we stop, we die." They ran. Roman, usually the fastest thing on 2 legs, struggled to keep up in his weakened human state. His lungs burned and his legs felt like lead, but every time he stumbled, Clara was there. A hand on his elbow, a shove on his back. She was steering him, protecting him. "Leave me," Roman gasped after a mile. "I'm slowing you down. I can hold them off." Clara stopped, grabbed his face in her hands, and forced him to look at her. In the gloom, her violet eyes were glowing fiercely. "I have spent 22 years running," she hissed. "I am done leaving people behind. You are coming with me, Alpha, even if I have to carry you." A spark jumped between them, hot and electric. Roman felt it all the way to his toes. It was the mate bond, trying to snap into place, fighting through the drugs in his system. She felt it too. He saw her pupils dilate. "Contact rear!" Marcus yelled from behind them. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked against the curved metal walls of the tunnel. "Go!" Marcus roared, turning and firing his shotgun blindly into the darkness behind them to suppress the pursuers. Clara grabbed Roman's hand and pulled. They sprinted, the sound of war echoing at their heels. They burst out of the tunnel and into the blinding white of a winter afternoon. They were on a narrow ledge overlooking a deep, frozen river gorge. The wind whipped at their clothes. "Dead end," Roman cursed, looking over the edge. It was a 100-foot drop to the ice. "Not a dead end," Clara said. "A shortcut." Before Roman could ask what she meant, the tunnel exit behind them swarmed with soldiers. Silas stepped out, flanked by 3 heavy enforcers holding assault rifles. "End of the line, Your Majesty," Silas called out, his voice smooth and mocking. He looked impeccable in his winter coat, not a hair out of place. Marcus stumbled out of the tunnel a second later, bleeding from a shoulder wound. He collapsed on the snow, clutching his shotgun. "Silas!" Roman stepped forward, his pistol raised. "You traitorous bastard!" Silas sighed, looking bored. "Don't be dramatic, Roman. It's just politics. The council decided you were too soft, too interested in peace. We need a war to keep the pack strong. And capturing the Lycan bitch?" He gestured to Clara. "That guarantees us the power to win any war." "She's not a weapon," Roman snarled. "She's a battery," Silas corrected. "And once we strap her to a lab table, we'll drain every drop of magic out of her." Clara stepped in front of Roman. She wasn't shivering anymore. She was vibrating with energy. "You think you can take me?" Clara asked, her voice dropping into that prehistoric growl. "I think I brought insurance." Silas smiled. He snapped his fingers. From the trees lining the ledge, 5 more wolves emerged, but they weren't normal wolves. They were monstrous, deformed hulks, with metal collars embedded in their flesh. Stim wolves, drugged into insanity, feeling no pain, only bloodlust. "Kill the old man," Silas ordered. "Break the king's legs, take the girl alive." The stim wolves lunged. "Roman, get Marcus," Clara screamed. She didn't shift. She didn't have time. As the first monster leaped at her, Clara threw her hands out. A blast of concussive force, visible as a ripple in the air, slammed into the wolves. It knocked 3 of them backward over the cliff edge. They whined as they plummeted to the ice below. Telekinesis, a true royal ability. But two wolves got through. One tackled Roman, pinning him to the snow. The jaws snapped inches from his face. Roman jammed his pistol into the wolf's mouth and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. The wolf lunged for his throat. Suddenly, a blur of motion slammed into the beast. Clara. She had tackled a 1,000-pound monster in her human form. She roared, grabbing the wolf's upper and lower jaws with her bare hands. With a sickening crunch, she tore the beast's mouth open, breaking its jaw. She tossed the carcass aside like a rag doll, but the distraction cost her. Silas raised his rifle and fired. Bang! The shot echoed across the gorge. Clara gasped, stumbling back. A bloom of red spread across her stomach, staining the white snow. No, Roman screamed. The sound tore from his throat, raw and agonizing. Seeing her fall, seeing her blood, it broke something inside him. The barrier the drugs had built around his wolf shattered. The rage was too great. The need to protect his mate was too strong. Roman's bones cracked loudly. He didn't just shift, he exploded into his form. The black fur burst from his skin, shredding his clothes. Titan was back, and he was insane with fury, but Silas wasn't waiting around. Dart him again! Now! The soldiers raised their tranquilizer guns. Clara, clutching her bleeding stomach, looked at Roman. She saw the soldiers taking aim. She knew if they took him, they would kill him. She made a choice. Roman, she choked out. The massive black wolf looked at her. Jump, she commanded, using the royal voice. She summoned the last of her strength. She didn't hit the soldiers. She hit the ground beneath Roman and Marcus. The cliff ledge shattered. With a roar of crumbling stone, the ground gave way. Roman, Marcus, and the bleeding Clara fell backward into the abyss, plummeting toward the frozen river below as Silas watched from the edge, cursing. The wind rushed past Roman's ears. He reached out in midair, his massive paws grabbing for Clara. He caught her by the back of her shirt, pulling her into his chest to shield her from the impact. Then, darkness. The ice did not break their fall. The water did. It was black, freezing, and moved with the violence of a freight train. Roman hit the surface with the force of a cannonball, the impact knocking the breath from his massive lungs. The cold was instantaneous, a million needles piercing his thick fur. But the cold meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was the scent of blood, her blood, being washed away by the current. He paddled frantically, his golden eyes scanning the churning foam. Clara. He saw a flash of pale skin bobbing 20 yards downstream. He roared underwater, a sound of pure desperation, and kicked his powerful legs. Titan cut through the current like a torpedo. He reached her, his jaws clamping gently onto the back of her coat, and dragged her head above the surface. She was limp. Her heart was beating, but it was a faint, fluttering bird in her chest. Marcus had managed to grab onto a floating log near the bank. He was coughing up water, shivering violently, but he waved Roman toward a hidden alcove obscured by frozen willow branches. Roman dragged Clara onto the rocky bank. He immediately shifted back to human form, naked, shivering, and desperate. He scooped her up in his arms. She was terrifyingly cold. The wound in her stomach was a jagged, ugly mess where the bullet had torn through. Cave, Marcus chattered, pointing to a fissure in the rock wall. Dry wood. Matches in my waterproof bag. Go. Roman didn't need to be told twice. He carried Clara into the small cavern. It was shallow but dry, shielded from the biting wind. He laid her down on the dirt floor, stripping off her wet, freezing clothes with trembling hands. Stay with me, Clara, he pleaded, pressing his hands over the wound to staunch the bleeding. You are a lichen. You are a god. Heal. Damn it, heal. Marcus stumbled in, collapsing against the wall. He threw a waterproof canister of matches and a flare to Roman. She can't heal, Marcus wheezed, clutching his broken ribs. Not from that. It was a silver nitrate hollow point. It poisons the blood, stops the regeneration. Roman's head snapped up. Then how do we save her? Marcus looked at the king. I can't. You have to. How? Roman roared, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. The bond, Marcus whispered. A lichened soul is tethered to its mate. If the bond is rejected or unacknowledged, she is mortal. But if the bond is sealed, if the Alpha King shares his life force with her, she can burn out the poison. Roman looked down at Clara. Her lips were blue. Her grey eyes were half open, glazed and unseeing. He had spent his whole life being told that power came from conquest, from lineage, from fear. But looking at her, the quiet maid who had scrubbed his flaws, the warrior who had saved his life, the woman who challenged him, he realized power meant nothing without her. He didn't care about the politics. He didn't care about the council. He lay down beside her on the cold dirt. He pulled her freezing body against his chest, skin to skin. He buried his face in her wet, tangled hair. Clara, he whispered against her ear, I am not your king. I am your mate. I am yours. He bit into his own wrist, drawing blood, and pressed it to her lips. Drink, he commanded softly. Take it. Take everything. Clara groaned faintly. Instinct took over. Her tongue darted out, tasting the alpha blood. She swallowed. The reaction was violent. Roman felt a searing heat rip through his chest, a golden tether of energy snapping into place between his heart and hers. It wasn't just a bond. It was a collision of souls. He felt her pain, her loneliness, her rage, and her overwhelming protectiveness. And she felt his regret, his admiration, and his love. Clara arched her back, gasping. Her eyes flew open. They weren't grey anymore. They were two supernovas of violet light. Steam began to rise from her skin. The wound on her stomach hissed, the silver poison being pushed out by the sheer force of her regenerating cells. The flesh knitted together before Roman's eyes, leaving nothing but a faint silver scar. She took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at him. The violet faded back to a soft, exhausted grey. You stayed, she whispered, sounding surprised. Roman smoothed the hair back from her forehead. I'm never leaving again. The great hall of the Silver Creek pack was draped in banners of mourning, but the mood wasn't sad. It was tense. Silas stood on the raised dais, wearing a black suit that was far too expensive. Beside him stood Beatrice, preening in a black silk dress, acting the part of the grieving widow, despite never having been married to the king. It is with a heavy heart, Silas bellowed to the hundreds of gathered wolves, that I accept the burden of the crown. King Roman died a hero, trying to save us from the rogue assassin who infiltrated our home. The maid, the creature, dragged him to his death. A murmur went through the crowd. Some looked skeptical, but most looked afraid. The Inquisition soldiers lined the walls, their weapons ready. As your new king, Silas continued, picking up the heavy iron crown that had belonged to Roman's father, my first decree is a purge. We will root out all weakness in our packs, starting with the nulls. He gestured to the side of the room. A group of 10 terrified servants, cooks, cleaners, gardeners, were huddled together, guarded by armed men. These genetic failures are a drain on our resources, Silas sneered. We will cleanse the pack. Beatrice stepped forward, holding a torch. Burn them out, she shouted, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. Stop. The word wasn't shouted. It was spoken with the quiet, terrifying authority of a thunderclap. The heavy oak doors at the back of the hall didn't just open. They exploded. Splinters of wood rained down on the crowd as the doors were ripped from their hinges. Standing in the dust and debris was not a dead king. It was Roman. He looked feral. He was shirtless, wearing only torn trousers, his body smeared with mud and dried blood. His golden eyes burned with a murder that made the Inquisition soldiers take a step back. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her hand in his, was Clara. She wore a simple tunic she had scavenged, but she looked like a queen. Her presence was so overwhelming that the air in the room crackled with static. The candles on the walls flickered and flared violet. "Roman?" Silas stammered, the crown slipping from his numb fingers and clattering onto the floor. "Impossible. I saw you fall. You saw what you wanted to see, coward," Roman growled, stalking down the center aisle. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, wolves falling to their knees in instinctive submission to the true Alpha. "Kill them!" Silas shrieked, pointing at them. "Kill them both! They are traitors!" The Inquisition soldiers raised their rifles. "No," Clara said. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stomped her foot. A shockwave of telekinetic force ripped through the room. It hit the soldiers like a physical wall, knocking them off their feet, sending rifles skittering across the floor. Beatrice shrieked and tried to run. "Stay!" Clara commanded. Beatrice froze, her feet glued to the floor by an invisible weight. Roman stopped at the foot of the dais. He looked up at his former best friend. "You wanted a war, Silas," Roman said, his voice calm and cold. "You wanted to be strong. Show me." Silas, realizing there was no escape, snarled. His face contorted as he shifted. He was a large wolf, brown and scarred, fueled by jealousy and entitlement. He leaped from the stage, aiming for Roman's throat. Roman didn't shift. He didn't have to. He caught Silas mid-air by the throat, with one hand. The strength of the Alpha King, amplified by the bond of a royal lichen mate, was insurmountable. Roman slammed Silas into the stone floor with enough force to crack the foundation. Silas whimpered, shifting back to human form, broken and gasping. Roman loomed over him. "You betrayed your king. You betrayed your pack. But worst of all, you hurt her." Roman raised his fist to deliver the killing blow. "Wait," Clara said. Roman paused, his fist hovering inches from Silas's face. He looked at Clara. Clara walked up the steps of the dais. She looked down at the trembling, broken Silas. Then she looked at the terrified crowd. She looked at the huddled group of nulls who were crying with relief. "Death is too easy for him," Clara said. Her voice carried to the rafters. "He wanted to purge the weak. He wanted to kill those without status." She knelt down and placed her hand on Silas's forehead. Her eyes glowed violet. "So let him be what he hates." She pulled her hand back. A dark, oily smoke seemed to be ripped from Silas's body. He screamed, a high, thin sound of absolute loss. When the screaming stopped, Silas lay there, panting. He looked up at Clara, his eyes wide. He tried to growl. He tried to shift. Nothing happened. "I have stripped your wolf," Clara announced. "You are not an alpha. You are not a beta. You are nothing. You will live the rest of your life as a human, serving the very people you tried to execute." She stood up and turned to Beatrice. "And you will join him. You will scrub the floors you made me scrub. You will learn what it means to be invisible." Beatrice fell to her knees, sobbing. Roman stepped up beside Clara. He took her hand and raised it high. "Kneel," Roman commanded the room. "Kneel before your queen." Every knee hit the floor. The soldiers, the elders, the visitors, even the general, Marcus, who had limped in from the back, bowed his head with a proud smile. Clara looked out at the sea of bowed heads. She looked at the man who loved her, the king who had followed her into the dark and found his own soul. She wasn't the invisible maid anymore. She was the last lichen. And she was home. And that is the story of how a king found his power by embracing the one person everyone else threw away. Roman and Clara didn't just rule. They changed the world. They proved that true strength isn't about claws or crowns. It's about seeing the value in others that the rest of the world ignores. They built a kingdom where no one was invisible, and they ruled it together, side by side, until the end of their days. What did you think of Silas's punishment? Was it justice, or should Roman have ended him right there? And let's be honest, Clara's transformation scene? Iconic. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal, magic, and romance, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, share this video with your fellow werewolf romance lovers, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Silas? Thanks for watching, and see you in the